over on my Patreon the other day, we had some people chatting about what they're listening to, and I had one of my supporters mention a song by a band called Playgrounded. The song is called The Death of Death, and he specifically mentioned that there's this one rhythmic section that nobody he's talked to before has been able to explain to him or figure out. And to any self-respecting music nerd out there, that sounds like a challenge. So I went ahead and figured out that riff, but I also thought it might be interesting to see how I went about doing that. What steps did I take? What was the process? And maybe I can show you guys so that you can use these tools in figuring out your favorite riffs from your favorite songs. There are a couple of documents that you might want to download for today's video. The first is a Rhythmic Grid, and we'll go over this a little bit later. The second is just the transcription of the riff if this is something you're interested in learning. So with all that, let's get into how I learned this riff. Alright, so my first step in this process is always going to be just using a very simple notation to write out what I'm hearing. And I'm also probably going to be listening to this at a slower tempo if it's too fast for me to hear easily. It's a good idea to listen to something a few times in a row just to get it in the brain a little bit, into the ears, but there's no shame in going a little bit slower if you can't quite keep up with how fast a song is. So we're going to listen to this at 70% speed, and I'm just going to start marking down little dots when I hear attacks on the guitar. Okay. So already I'm kind of behind. I have a couple of little dots that you can barely see because I'm just trying to go quick right now. We can fill those out a bit. So we heard 2 single attacks right off the top. And then a gallop. So bum, bum, bada bum. So bada bum is a 3-note grouping. So all I'm going to do is just make that little 3-note grouping like that. So far we have bum, bum, da-dum. Then I'll just start over. Okay, so I heard 2 gallops actually, and then it was followed by just a single note. And this is on track kind of with what I had started writing in the first place. So one more time. Okay, so it sounds like we have 3 gallops coming after that, so I'm going to fill those in. So already we can, if you wanted to, you could start learning this on the guitar. And it's breaking down pretty simply. We have kind of single notes or 2 slower hits in a row, and then these gallops. So. Bum, ba, bum. Okay, so after these 3 gallops, we had da-dun, 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 dun, da-dun. So that kind of sounds like 2 notes close together. Let's keep filling in a little bit more, and then I'll just complete the rest on my own here. And I'm just going to fill out the rest of this in the same way now and speed it up for you guys so you don't have to endure this process. But this is the kind of first step of this whole situation. Now, there's a long note right here. So sometimes what I'll do to indicate a long note is just draw a line after it. And that's just to tell me later that that's something different. It's a single note, but it is held compared to all the rest. This long note also gives me a nice place to kind of start the riff at, so I don't have to always start at the beginning at this point. At this point we have another long note. I'm going to start the cue up here. Alright, so this is the whole riff. Let's listen to it at full speed, and we're going to follow along with it to make sure we got it. And that's it. That's the first step. So at this point, if your goal is just to learn and play the riff, then you should probably be able to do it. We can now see kind of the patterns, we can see the different rhythmic groupings, and that should be enough just to kind of follow along with your dots and play along with the song. The next steps though are going to be for those people who want to get some deeper understanding of what is going on rhythmically and see how it lines up and what makes these rhythms sound cool. This is especially useful for those of you who are trying to compose a little bit and write some interesting rhythms for your riffs. So at this point, I want to answer a few questions to understand this further. What is our basic subdivision, like eighth notes, 16th notes, 32nd notes? How many beats are in the pattern? Does the pattern repeat at any point? And are there any time signature changes? So let's start off by figuring out what is the underlying pulse. So it feels like the big beat is somewhere around here, right? Bum dun 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 dun. That's gonna be the quarter note, and then I heard the drummer playing the hi-hat and these kind of double notes that are going on as eighth notes. So bum bum dun 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 dun. So I think we're kind of dealing with eighth notes, and then these like quick gallops are going to be 32nd notes or 16th notes. So I'm just going to write this in here so we can have that. So we have eighth notes when we have those doubles, and the gallop is comprised of two 32nd notes and a 16th note. Now maybe we want to know how many beats are in this whole rhythmic cycle. So now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to use my fingers, and I'll show you a cool way to count. You can use your joints on your fingers to figure out beats. So it filled up both of my hands perfectly, which means 4 times 8 is 32 beats. So that's a nice even number, and it is divisible by 4, which means we could probably count this whole thing in 4/4. There might be some time signature changes, but at least we know it kind of lines up in 4/4. Next, we're going to want to figure out if there are any repeats going on in the pattern, because it would be nice if we could kind of condense this into a shorter cycle. So right away, I noticed that there are 2 long notes, and maybe I want to kind of go out from those, because those kind of indicate that maybe something is happening the same twice. So let's go after the long notes first. We have 2 eighth notes, and we have gallop, 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 single note, gallop, gallop, gallop. Okay, and so the end is here. So I'm going to put just like a light dotted line here, because that might be the end. And let's go backwards to make sure it is all the same before that long note as well. It looks like this is the split point. This is where the pattern repeats, and everything after that line is the same as what came before it. And now for the maybe trickier part that might feel more subjective, which is trying to figure out the time signature changes, if there are any. As we already said, this could be counted in 4/4, but I don't know that it is, because the accents don't always fall on beat 1 if we were to count it in 4/4. So let's listen along, and I'm going to just clap when I feel like the accent is put on a beat 1. This little double note here, bum ba bum, sounds like it's kind of trying to realign to beat 1. So dun 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 dun. So we slam back down onto beat 1 right there. So that sounds like the start of a measure. I'll just put a large dot there, which means we also start here. After this long note, it kind of has a big downbeat as well. And then we know we repeat here. So that means we have kind of a group of notes here as one measure, a group of notes here as another measure, and then finally this last group. So really 3 groups. So let's count and see how many beats are in each of those groups. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in that first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, ending on the long note, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 again in that second one. So we have 6, 4, 4, 4, 6, 4. And if that happens again, 6, 4, 6, 6, 4, 6, that is 32. So we still get our 32 beats that we counted before. You can kind of figure that question out at any point during the process. And you can even do it during our next phase, which is writing this all on a rhythmic grid. So you can download this as a PDF and use it in all of your rhythmic composing and transcribing needs. The link is in the description. And this is just somewhere now that we can write our dots and start to see where they line up. Now, this grid is kind of cool because we can separate these dots into whatever we want. So for our song, we're going to be using 16th notes, 1 E and A, just into groups of 4. But if your song was based in triplets, you could do this in groups of 3. So we can go ahead and start this process. 8th notes are going to count as 2 16th notes. So we're going to get these 2 filled out, and then we have this gallop, which we know is a 32nd note, so we have to fill in a little extra note in between here to get that 32nd note. We have another gallop after a little break, and then we have another single note, and so on and so on. And I could keep filling this out, but magically, just like those cooking shows where they pre-make the meal, I've done it already. So you can notice I've put the time signature changes in, I have put my line still to indicate where that long note falls, and I've put dotted lines in between each beat. At the end, we have a repeat back to the beginning, so I don't have to write the whole thing out twice. And finally, in this third and final step, we're just going to apply rhythmic beaming to the notes that we have on our grid so that we can translate it into the final finished product, either handwritten version or in some software program like Guitar Pro, Sibelius, Finale, etc. Now, if you are fluent in kind of rhythmic notation, you might just be able to go right ahead into Guitar Pro or whatever kind of notation software you use and start entering this, but it might be useful to still have the grid in front of us and draw it out. So what we can do is start adding beams to these notes. Alright, so I've decided on doing a tie rather than adding rests and kind of isolated notes. I find this a little bit easier to read. And then from here, we can just add it into our software notation, and then we can have a playback track of it, and we're good to go. We've figured out the entire riff. So I hope this insight is useful for you guys, and you're able to take it away and use it in your own practice and learning. Now, if you have a different process for figuring out rhythms, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear it. It's always very interesting to hear how people's minds work. And as mentioned at the beginning of the video, I do now have a Patreon, which you can sign up for free or for one of the paid tiers. The free sign-up gets you access to some discussion boards so we can share information with each other, but if you're at the Thumper tier or above, then we get 2 15-minute meetings a month where we can chat one-on-one about whatever you like, including some difficult rhythms you might be working on. So with all that said, I hope wherever you are in the world you have a great rest of your day, and as always, happy practicing.